Imagine the stories they would tell if walls could talk. We take a journey from Hadrian's Wall in the west, through the ports of India in the south, to the Great Wall of China in the east. It is thanks to monumental structures such as Hadrian's Wall that Rome's mastery of engineering and strategy will not be forgotten. This 4-meter-high barrier stretched across Britain, from Wall's End in the east to the far west coast. More than just a wall, it was part of an extensive fortification system, reinforced with multiple layers of defense. Mile castles were built along the entire length of the wall to accommodate a small garrison, along with several larger forts housing some 600 men. More than being present in Rome, Emperor Hadrian was traveling around, personally assessing the situation in each region. Unlike his predecessors, who governed mainly from the capital and only occasionally visited the provinces to quell rebellions or make a new conquest. In the year 122, Hadrian arrived in the British Isles. Unsatisfied with the earthen barrier already in place, Hadrian ordered the construction of his wall. 3 Roman legions, supported by auxiliary troops and local craftsmen, took around 6 years to complete its construction, with work continuing afterward. When it comes to written sources on Hadrian, we basically have just 2, the Historia Augusta and the writings of Cassius Dio. While the Historia Augusta wasn't composed until the end of the 4th century, Cassius Dio completed his Roman history at the beginning of the 3rd century. Dio was of Greek origin, but he had first-hand experience with Roman politics, having served in public positions such as senator or consul. Unfortunately, much of his work has been lost, but what remains shows his sharp and critical perspective. So, we let Dio tell the story.
Hadrian traveled through one province after another, visiting the various regions and cities and inspecting all the garrisons and forts. He personally viewed and investigated absolutely everything, not merely the usual appurtenances of camps, such as weapons, engines, trenches, ramparts and palisades, but also the private affairs of everyone, both of the men serving in the ranks and of the officers themselves, their lives, their quarters and their habits, and he reformed and corrected in many cases practices and arrangements for living that had become too luxurious. He drilled the men for every kind of battle, honoring some and reproving others, and he taught them all what should be done. And in order that they should be benefited by observing him, he everywhere led a rigorous life and either walked or rode on horseback on all occasions, never once at this period setting foot in either a chariot or a 4-wheeled vehicle.
Publius Aelius Hadrian was born in 76 AD in Italica, in present-day Spain. His father was Senator Hadrian Afer, a relative of Marcus Traianus, also from Italica, who would go on to become Emperor Trajan. But long before that, when young Hadrian was only 10 years old, both his parents died. He was then placed under the guardianship of Trajan, together with Publius Attianus, the future Praetorian prefect. Not long after Trajan became emperor in 98 AD, Hadrian married Trajan's niece, Vibia Sabina. As the story goes, this scheme was plotted by Trajan's powerful wife, fittingly named Empress Plotina. But Trajan himself seemed a lot less enthusiastic about his own protégé. He certainly had no intention to adopt Hadrian as his successor right away, or even help him become a consul. In fact, Trajan may never have appointed a successor at all. Similar to the dramatic exit 4 centuries earlier of Alexander the Great, of whom Trajan was a great admirer. At least according to Dio, but the sources contradict each other. What we can be sure of is that serious doubts remained about Hadrian's legitimacy as emperor. Says Dio,
"My father, Apronianus, who was governor of Cilicia, had ascertained accurately the whole story about him. in particular stating that the death of Trajan was concealed for several days in order that Hadrian's adoption might be announced first. This was shown also by Trajan's letters to the Senate, for they were signed, not by him, but by Plotina, although she had not done this in any previous instance.
In any case, in the year 117, Hadrian became the new emperor, granting the old one his rightful place among the gods. He started off his reign with the execution of 4 rival consuls, hardly the best way to foster good relationships with the Senate, even if he denied being responsible.
Hadrian, though he ruled with the greatest mildness, was nevertheless severely criticized for slaying several of the best men in the beginning of his reign, and again near the end of his life, and for this reason he came near failing to be enrolled among the demigods.
Perhaps the mistrust was mutual, as Hadrian didn't seem to feel quite at home in Rome. Coming from Spain himself, he believed that the provinces deserved more equality with the center of his empire. Already as a young man, he had shown a deep passion for Greek literature and philosophy. Once emperor, he was the first to wear a beard, demonstrating his profound admiration for Hellenic culture. In Rome, virtus and auctoritas, values like courage and standing, had long been tied to success on the battlefield. For a soldier, the ultimate honor was the corona maurolis, or crown of the wall, awarded to the first man to scale an enemy fortress. For generals, the greatest distinction was to be hailed as imperator by their troops. Hadrian may well have shared this warrior ethos, while still under the watch of Trajan. But when the weight of empire fell on his own shoulders, Hadrian recognized that further conquests were becoming increasingly costly. After centuries of relentless expansion, he took the empire in a different direction, consolidating its borders rather than keep expanding forever. He worked to resolve ongoing conflicts and refrained from launching new wars. From Britain to the Rhine and the Middle East, he reinforced Rome's frontiers with defensive fortifications known as the limes. Indeed, the limit was reached. Hadrian's walls were not just a military strategy, they served an important economic purpose as well. Literally tariff walls, they enabled Rome to collect taxes more effectively. Trade in all kinds of goods brought great prosperity, and the Roman state did not want to miss out on its share of the pie. As one might expect, Hadrian's novel ideas were not limited to economics. A lover of art and architecture, he designed the biggest temple of Rome, dedicated to Venus and Roma. His Library of Athens, among other public buildings, earned him the title Graeculus, Little Greek. If you asked him, he was probably the greatest builder ever. At least according to Cassius Dio.
His ambition was insatiable, and hence he practiced all conceivable pursuits, even the most trivial. For example, he modeled and painted, and declared that there was nothing pertaining to peace or war, to imperial or private life, of which he was not cognizant. All this, of course, did people no harm, but his jealousy of all who excelled in any respect was most terrible and caused the downfall of many, besides utterly destroying several. For, inasmuch he wished to surpass everybody in everything, he hated those who attained eminence in any direction.
Hadrian introduced a number of legal reforms, no doubt with the intention of promoting the republican ideal of legal equality. Ordinary people could face brutal punishments for minor offenses, such as being sent to the mines, or the arena for more serious crimes. High-ranking citizens, the honestiores, would get off with paying a fine, or, in more severe cases, the loss of civil rights or banishment. Hadrian granted more citizens the privileges of honestiores, but by doing so, he only further entrenched the divide between social classes. On the other hand, he also limited the punishments that slaves could suffer somewhat. Yet Hadrian is not seen as particularly friendly to slaves and lower classes, but rather as a traditionalist, who required senators and other honestiors to wear the toga in public. In a previous episode, we talked about the apparent homosexuality of then Emperor Trajan, and how society was more concerned with maintaining its hierarchies than with gender or even age. Hadrian too was involved with a Greek young man named Antinous. Perhaps, in Hadrian's mind, their perfect union symbolized the fusion of Roman vigor with the beauty of Greek culture. In the year 130, as they were traveling together through Egypt, Antinous tragically died. Exactly what happened remains obscure. Did he simply drown in the Nile because he couldn't swim? Or was he sacrificed in some occult ritual they were engaged in? In any case, Antinous was deified by Hadrian, and a new city named Antinopolis was built, as the center of a widespread Hellenistic cult that lasted until the 4th century. As scandalous as all this may be, it also shows Rome's tolerance for religious diversity. All that seemed to matter was to honor the emperor and, of course, pay taxes. Even the early Christians were not considered a threat to the Roman state at this point. Yet, Hadrian's dream of a unified, Greek-Roman Empire inevitably clashed with ancient Jewish traditions. Issues like his plans for Jerusalem, or his alleged ban on circumcision, did not sit well with the Jews. In 132, a revolt broke out in Judea, led by Simon Bar Kokhba. The early Christians in Judea would rather not get involved, even if most were from Jewish descent. Not only because Bar Kokhba presented himself as the true Messiah, but for other good reasons as well. Indeed, Hadrian responded with devastating force. His legions crushed the insurgents, and by 135, Judea was practically depopulated. The province was renamed Syria-Palestine, and a temple to Jupiter was built on the ruins of the Second Temple, as was the plan. Jerusalem itself was rebuilt as a Roman town, named Aelia Capitolina, which would remain its name until the 4th century. No Jews were allowed to stay. In his final years, Hadrian suffered from severe illness. This forced him to consider his succession more seriously. The elderly Servianus apparently criticized his choices, having imagined his own grandson in that position. As Dio explains,
Servianus before being executed asked for fire, and as he offered incense he exclaimed, "That I am guilty of no wrong, ye, O gods, are well aware. As for Hadrian, this is my only prayer, that he may long for death but be unable to die." There is, indeed, a letter of his in existence which gives proof of precisely this, how dreadful it is to long for death and yet be unable to die.
And indeed, as the story goes, Hadrian had to be prevented from ending his suffering more than once. But in 138, he finally died. The cause of death is impossible to know for certain, but there are some clues that point to problems with his heart and circulation. Even if he was known for his love of hunting and relatively healthy lifestyle. On some statues, a crease in the earlobes is clearly visible. Known as Frank's sign, these marks could be associated with coronary artery disease. Dio says that Hadrian suffered from nosebleeds and edema. It is also notable that Hadrian's parents both died rather young. Hadrian eventually adopted Antoninus Pius as his successor, who in turn made sure that the Senate granted Hadrian his deification. Hadrian also arranged for Marcus Aurelius to be adopted by Antoninus. According to Dio, Hadrian informed the Senate in this manner.
"I have not been permitted by nature to have a son, my friends, but you have made it possible by legal enactment. Now, there is this difference between the two methods, that a begotten son turns out to be whatever sort of person heaven pleases, whereas one that is adopted a man takes to himself as the result of a deliberate selection."
We're sailing eastward on a merchant ship, carried by the Hippolytus winds. It's no wonder that these monsoons are also known as trade winds, for by now, the bulk of Silk Road trade went by sea rather than over land. In southern Egypt, a Buddha statue from the 2nd century was discovered, as a testimony to the exchange of ideas along these routes. After a journey of about 40 days, we arrive at Baragaza at the west coast of India. Of course, we brought along our 1st century travel guide, the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea.
And for the king there are brought into those places very costly vessels of silver, singing boys, beautiful maidens for the harem, fine wines, thin clothing of the finest weaves, the choicest ointments,
ivory, pepper, exotic spices, and precious stones. Luxurious textiles, as well as more modest fabrics. All these, and much more, found their way into Roman homes. Perhaps due to the prosperity this lucrative trade brought to India, the Kushan Empire continued to grow in power. The reign of Emperor Kanishka marked the height of this great empire. While his rule is generally placed in the early 2nd century, perhaps between 127 and 140, the exact dates remain contested. This uncertainty highlights just how little we know about this once great civilization. Kanishka's empire was a melting pot of different cultures. His many coins depict Buddhist and Hindu deities, as well as Zoroastrian and Greek gods. They bear inscriptions not only in local languages, but also in Greek, a legacy of the campaigns that took Alexander the Great to India 4 centuries earlier. One of the few texts we have from the Kushan period is the Rabatak inscription, dating to the 2nd century. The inscription highlights Kanishka's effort to promote the Bactrian language, referred to as Aryan in the text. It is indeed written in Bactrian, while still using the Greek script. The inscription lists the names of Kushan rulers, and reflects Kanishka's vast territorial conquests, along with his portrayal as a godlike ruler. Yet it is Kanishka's patronage of Buddhism for which he is best remembered. For this reason, he is sometimes called the 2nd Ashoka, the legendary king and promoter of Buddhism from the 3rd century BC. But while Ashoka was essential to establishing Buddhism across the Indian subcontinent, Kanishka's efforts helped transform it into a truly international religion. In ancient Buddhist texts later written in China, the West is often cited as the origin of their teachings. From a Chinese perspective, the West meant India, where Mahayana Buddhism was gaining influence during Kanishka's reign. Also known as the Great Vehicle, Mahayana Buddhism is most easily recognized by its magnificent bodhisattvas. These saints are not yet Buddhas, but dedicated to helping others reach nirvana. In contrast, traditional Buddhism focuses more on the individual's personal path to enlightenment. In those days, Gandhara was the center of Mahayana Buddhism. From there, a monk named Lokaksema headed to Luoyang, the capital of Han China, to become the first known translator of Mahayana scriptures into Chinese.
Doers of what is hard are the bodhisattvas who have set out for the benefit and happiness of the world, out of pity for it. We will become a shelter for the world, a refuge, the place of rest, the final relief, islands, lights, and leaders of the world. We will win full enlightenment, and become the resort of the world. With these words they make a vigorous effort to win such a full enlightenment.
We continue our journey to the east, until we encounter another wall in the north, the famous Great Wall of China. During the Han Dynasty, it was not yet the mighty stone structure we recognize today, but rather a vast system of earthen fortifications, stretching over thousands of kilometers. It was meant to hold back the various northern tribes, but in this period, it was internal struggles that most troubled the empire. More on that in the next episode. For now, we end with 1st century Chinese philosopher Wang Chong, as we can never get enough of his humorous critique of popular beliefs. We already saw how the Chinese zodiac, with its 12 signs, corresponds to other zodiacs worldwide. Just as remarkable is the way the Han Chinese saw the universe as composed of 5 elements, similar to the 4 elements of ancient Greek philosophy: earth, water, air, and fire.
Should anybody object by saying that men are much more precious than things, and that their vital spirit is different, we can reply that as a matter of fact, things can be metamorphosed, but man cannot, and that so far his vital spirit is on the contrary inferior to that of things, whose essence surpasses that of man. Water and fire drown and burn. All that can injure man must be a substance belonging to one of the 5 elements. Metal hurts man, wood beats him, earth crushes him, water drowns him, and fire burns him. See you in the next decade.